Alright, well, I've kept you guys waiting long enough. It is time to take a closer look at the newest trailer for Core 4 of the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime. Well, truthfully, I should say it's time to take a closer look at the rest of the trailer, as we've already analysed the specific sequence featuring Gerard and Kenpachi in a separate video, which if you haven't seen yet, I implore you to check it out alongside this one. I'll leave the link somewhere on the screen, especially if you care at all about the questionable fate of the Vizard. Although this trailer was only a minute long, akin to the previous teaser trailer, this one was jam-packed with completely new footage from the word go, which is exactly what I wanted, and as such there is a ton to see here. So come join me as we spend an exorbitant amount of time, an unnecessarily long amount of time, poring over 60 seconds of brand new Thousand Year Blood War Arc Core 4 footage. Why? Because we absolutely love Bleach, and it's an awful lot of fun to do. In this video, we'll be diving into the trailer from start to finish, taking a shot-by-shot approach as we normally do, to scour it for secrets, references, and to try and glean what kind of direction the final core, perhaps the most pivotal core of them all so far, is going to take. So let's not waste any more time. Make sure to let me know down in the comments if you think I missed anything, and if there's even more to this minute-long trailer than I found. Of course, if you enjoy this kind of content and you want to help support the channel that extra step further, Patreon is the absolute best way to do it. Check out the link in the description and join the names popping up in the credits of every video. It really is appreciated a lot. So as you might expect, this latest trailer basically takes us through the 4 major battles of the arc that are still left to come. Yoruichi and Kisuke versus Askin, the Captain's Trio versus Gerard, Uryu versus Haschwalth, and Ichigo and Orihime versus Yhwach. What's fun about this trailer is that there's practically no hint whatsoever of anything outside of these tentpole battles, and therefore I think the trailer is purposefully designed to keep the core's true secrets very close to the chest. What they're basically showing us here is what we know will be there thanks to the manga, for the most part at least, and even then it's not everything. It's also likely that the content in this trailer is reserved for the first 3 or so episodes, those episodes releasing in cinemas in certain countries. Now that being said, both the initial teaser trailer and this one are trying to make one thing in particular very clear. The anime will be totally fixing Uryu versus Haschwalth, which in the manga was not only the worst fight of the Varvelt arc, but frankly, one of the most disappointing fights in probably at least the final arc, if not the entire series. Anyway, let's dive into the trailer itself, starting with a shot of Ichigo's foot. Would you look at that? In actuality, the trailer opens with a pretty rapid series of shots from Ichigo and Orihime versus Yhwach, which is more than the other fights, I would say, the overall focus of the trailer, so let's go through them all now. To be honest, we're already off to a bad start, as this shot of Ichigo's foot could realistically be from, well, any point in the battle, but there is a shot of Ichigo's foot in chapter 674 as he begins rushing towards Yhwach again, and this does line up with the kind of theme of the rest of the trailer, so I'm going to say it's the same shot. Also, as an aside, this is the chapter Isshin and Ryu can arrive at Varvelt in the manga, so again, that does give you an idea of just how much earlier they arrived in the anime, but of course there is no sign of them in the trailer. We then snap a shot of a bloodied Ichigo rushing towards the camera. Now this actually just appears to be the end of a different shot that shows up again in a few seconds, so we'll tackle that one in a moment. This is then followed by a shot of Yhwach sitting in his throne, and then a close-up shot of the Quincy King's mouth. So I'm guessing what we're seeing is this moment from chapter 673. Considering it looks like the fighting hasn't started yet, I'm guessing this is going to be Yhwach welcoming them to the throne room and commenting on Ichigo's heightened strength and the power that's flowing from him. Now again, this next shot is a little tricky. We see Orihime screaming something, followed immediately by a very cool image of her conjuring a massive shield to reject Yhwach's attack, which was always an awesome display of just how powerful Orihime has become by this point. Of course, the shot of her blocking the attack comes straight from chapter 675, where we find ourselves actually beginning to dig into the meat of the battle, but the shot of Orihime shouting looks to be new. Now again, this could reasonably be anything. Early in the fight, Orihime shouts for Ichigo to stop and listen to her when he seems to be rushing into battle without a second thought. But I don't actually get that vibe from this shot. This kind of feels more controlled and deliberate to me, so I think the anime is adding a new shot of her calling out Santen Kishun before stopping Yhwach, which she doesn't do in the manga, as you can see here. Next up, we have a couple of new shots, and I think they're pretty exciting. The first is just a close-up of Ichigo's bloodied face. However, thanks to the gold lighting in this image, it looks to be part of the same sequence as the next shot, which is a lot more interesting. Ichigo and Orihime staring at yet another brand new usage of Getsuga Jujisho. Yes, Ichigo's newest attack is getting even more screen time, which is fantastic to see, and I have to admit this shot is very nice. The religious imagery is pretty on the nose here, but again, I like it. I think it's very fitting for this battle. So Ichigo obviously isn't using Horn of Salvation yet in this image, meaning this moment must come very early in the battle, prior to the end of chapter 675. And interestingly, we can see Yhwach's Soul King power basically all over the place behind the Getsuga Jujisho. So my guess would be, is he puts up a huge wall of that power to completely stop the blast in its tracks, almost as a way of showing how much more capable the Quincy King is at dealing with it now compared to when they last fought in the original royal palace. Up next, we return to the manga with a close-up of Ichigo's face straight from the cliffhanger of chapter 672 as he enters the throne room. But what's more interesting here is Ichigo's new line of dialogue: "I will kill you." It's pretty simple, but it's also fascinating, and as we know, it doesn't really sound like Ichigo. Sure, he's actively tried to kill some villains in the past, such as Aizen with Mugetsu, and of course notoriously Tsukishima, in a development that was supposed to be a betrayal of his core character values, before he then actually mercy kills Ginjo. But this feels different to me. This isn't just duty. This feels like a direct response to Yhwach calling him out for not being willing to say that he will kill the man who murdered his mother. I imagine the anime is going to play up the importance of Ichigo's relationship with his parents and their relationship with Yhwach much more here against the Quincy King, but we'll see. We then get a shot of Ichigo's eyes from chapter 673, where he tells Yhwach that yes, he knows the origin of his powers, but he doesn't care. Again, there is a new line of dialogue playing here, this time from Orihime, where she says Kurasaki's heart must surely be, which again I imagine is in reference to Masaki and Ichigo's feelings regarding this fight and what it means to him, implying once more that the anime will be playing up that dynamic, which is great. We then get a new line from Yhwach himself, where he states, "Such hubris, Ichigo, to do that would be the same as killing the world," which I absolutely love. I am so happy to hear this. It is about damn time someone actually referenced the fact that Yhwach is the new Soul King, he is the new linchpin, and that killing him should theoretically collapse the worlds, just as it nearly did with Adnoius. And I might be overthinking this, but if they're actively referencing this already, I have some hope we might at least see the resulting new Soul King, the status quo of the new Soul King, once the war is over, to finally close that loop that it took Can't For Your Own World to reveal. After this, we get the preceding part of that earlier shot of Ichigo racing towards the camera, followed by him now slamming into Yhwach's Soul King energy. Ichigo's face is bloodied here, so the fight has already begun. I actually think this is a new element of the fight, though of course there are several shots like this in the manga as Ichigo rushes into battle against Yhwach's power. Honestly, this could be just before he uses Getsuga Jujisho, in fact. This is then followed up by a fantastic looking sequence where Yhwach unleashes torrents of his power at Ichigo, who then rushes towards the Quincy King. There's a really nice fluid dynamic angle at play here, striking at the Black Reiatsu as he runs. If we look closely, we can just about see that Ichigo has in fact lost his right sleeve in these shots of him running towards Yhwach. Now, Ichigo's sleeves, the condition of his sleeves, will, funnily enough, play quite a big role in determining what takes place where, in terms of the chronology of this entire scene. Now, Ichigo loses his right sleeve during chapter 674, after taking the first few hits from Yhwach's Soul King power. So this shot of him rushing towards the camera, rushing towards Yhwach, that appears to be a new shot that is going to be taking place early 674, whereas this next sequence of him running towards Yhwach, dashing towards the Quincy King, is going to be kind of the next part of that sequence after Ichigo has lost said sleeve. But again, it is all part of a new sequence, or at least a retelling of the sequence where he rushes Yhwach and gets smacked about by the Soul King's power. Yhwach's dialogue where he tells Ichigo to expend all of his power and die, followed by the close-up of Ichigo's injured face, is from chapter 674, leading me to think that yes, this is all part of that wider sequence. Also, one small point, but the bodies of the Bambis don't seem to be around anymore. I wonder if any explanation is going to be given for that. The camera then races through Varvelt, which I think is just the final shot of Core 3 but in reverse, before we move over to Yoruichi vs Askin. Now, Yoruichi vs Askin is expected to be episode 1 of the Core. In fact, like I said a minute ago, I think this trailer only really shows footage from the first 3 episodes, which is kind of crazy to imagine. The only content in here that I'm not sure about being in those first 3 episodes is some of Uryu versus Haschwalth, but I guess it might be if it's been kind of stretched out across the Core. Anyway, this shot of Yoruichi leaping backwards across a rooftop before reactivating Raijin Senkei is either totally new or just a fancier version of this moment from chapter 662, where, after being immunized against Askin's power by Kisuke, she turns to face the Sternritter again, and then releases her power. If this shot is just a flashier version of that same moment in the manga, then wow, they are really going all out on the movement. The next couple of shots are all from the same chapter, 662, where Yoruichi tries to punch Askin with Raijin Senkei activated, but he evades her before punching her in the gut. These are all in the manga, save for the one close-up shot of her face as she looks down at Askin's fist making contact with her. That one's new. Meanwhile, Kisuke's overlaid dialogue that's playing here is from the same chapter, where after Askin tells him that he's one of the 5 special war powers, Kisuke replies, "It's a privilege, but he's giving me too much credit. Isn't that right, Yoruichi?" referencing Yhwach. And of course, the following shot of Kisuke telling Yoruichi that she's about to transform is also from chapter 662 as well. We then see an enormous torrent of lightning explode into the sky as Yoruichi transforms, before we then skip to chapter 663, as Askin is now facing down Kokubyo Senbi's wrath. As we can see, Askin has a pretty nasty wound running down his chest in the shape of 3 claw marks. This is probably the same injury he receives here in the manga, as Yoruichi jumps him and slashes his shoulder, resulting in one of my favourite panels ever, by the way. Though the wound does appear to be slightly different, as in the manga she strikes his shoulder, but in the anime it would appear that she slashes his chest. I kind of feel like it doesn't make any sense that he has actual bloodied claw marks gouged right through his weird collar plate thing, and yet it hasn't come flying off, but the same was also true in the manga as well. However, while the next shot closing in on Askin like this is new, the actual shot of his face comes from this full page of Yoruichi bearing down upon him before she lands the final blow that forces him to use Volstendish. And then the next shot of Yoruichi smacking Askin around the top of a tower, which looks really cool by the way, and again is a great showcase of some really neat movement. It is totally new. And the lighting during these Yoruichi sequences is also going to be absolutely crazy by the looks of it. This is also the only glimpse, and it is tiny, of Yoruichi's new form that we actually get here in this trailer. Next up we have the Gerard sequence, which, as I said earlier, I've already dedicated an entire video to, so go and check that out. But suffice it to say, it is sticking surprisingly close to the manga so far, and that might not spell great news for the Vizard. Now, before we continue, if you haven't yet hit subscribe, I would implore you to do so. It is quick, it is easy, and it is free to do, and it will help me out enormously in the run-up to Core 4. We're trying to reach 300,000 subs by the end of the year. It's only going to be possible with your help, and I would greatly appreciate it. We've had a lot of new subs lately, and to all of you I want to say a massive thank you, and a welcome as well. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I hope you enjoy videos just like this one. But still, over 50% of you are not yet subscribed, so do consider doing so today. It does mean a lot. But now we move on to the most interesting part of the trailer, at least in my opinion. Here, the trailer provides us with our clearest look yet at the brand new fight between Uryu and Haschwalth. And it really does look spectacular, to be honest. I said before that Uryu versus Haschwalth needed fixing. I made an entire video on it. And to be fixed, it needed to be totally reworked. And that appears to be what they've done, to the point where this is almost a different fight entirely. It's telling that we haven't seen a single recognizable shot from the manga version yet. So, to begin with, we get a totally new line of dialogue from Haschwalth where he proclaims that dealing with traitors is also my job, which is pretty cool as it makes him feel like an actual sanctioned executioner to go along with the way he doled out judgment upon Kangdu and BG9. Equally interesting, though, is that the first shot we see involves Uryu using his full Volsten dish, by the way, evading a volley of arrows. Now, in the manga, there is one single panel of Haschwalth swinging his sword and unleashing some kind of energy arc at Uryu. It's never seen nor hinted at again, and it seemed to conflict with this idea that Haschwalth, as a special Quincy who gives power rather than receives it, had no talent whatsoever for innate Quincy techniques. Here in the anime, however, it looks like they might be going all in on actually giving him those abilities, especially if he's just casually firing off a bunch of arrows like this. And to be totally honest, this is actually what I was hoping for from a fully fledged battle between these two, for them to be wielding holy powers in an all-out angelic showdown. And if the anime is really going for it regarding Haschwalth, is there any chance he might be given a Volsten dish of his own after all? I could absolutely see them doing it. I've said it in the past that they could quite easily just introduce a clause that says something like, Haschwalth trained endlessly to achieve what came easily to the rest of the Quincy over the last 1,000 years, and boom, there you have it, he has Quincy techniques after all. Next, though, we have what might be the single most interesting shot in the entire trailer. Back in the previous teaser trailer, we saw a shot of Uryu pinned beneath Haschwalth, the two of them balancing precariously on a thin rafter of sorts. Now, while we couldn't make out what was beneath them in that trailer, there was a bright blue glow that I discussed in that previous video. Well, now we can see what's beneath them, and it is pretty cool and a little unexpected. First of all, the bright blue glow is coming from what looks to be an extremely dense layer of glowing ice. It's very odd. Of course, Varvelt is covered in ice, but it's never looked like this before. This whole arena that they seem to currently be fighting in looks like it was shaped by an explosion of some kind to me, or maybe some kind of energy pillar that's torn upwards through the floor, decimating the different levels. Is it some ability of Haschwalth's? Was it triggered by Uryu activating his Volsten dish, perhaps? Or could it be related to that mysterious red sphere that we saw in Core 3, the identity of which is still unknown to us? What if that sphere has exploded as a result of their battle, leaving this gaping hole in the tower? That still doesn't necessarily explain why the ice appears to be glowing, though. However, even more intriguing is what lies in wait beneath the ice itself. The two of them are suspended over what looks to be a rift in the worlds, surrounded by what appears to be a normal cloudy sky, so not what we're used to seeing in Varvelt at all. There's a couple of things to take from this. Firstly, one of the things I wanted the most does seem to be happening. These final battles are actually a race against time, with the worlds actively crossing over and collapsing around them as they fight. As far as raising the stakes goes, this is perfect. This is ideal. It makes so much sense and makes me really excited to see where we end up. I'm assuming this is coming about as a result of Ukitake and Mimihagi no longer able to hold Yhwach back, as we saw at the end of Core 3, so this final core, all hell should be breaking loose as the worlds are converging around them in real time. That's exactly what I wanted to see. The sense of world-ending urgency was simply not conveyed at all in the manga version of Varvelt, and that was always really weird. It was like, well, Yhwach now has the power of the Soul King, so why isn't he doing anything with it? He's just sitting there waiting to be defeated. But no, now his plan is actively underway, and that's really great to see. Secondly, going back to my earlier point about the rift, this rift is likely connecting them to the human world, since Waco Mundo's sky would presumably be greener in coloration. We saw in Core 3 the Soul Society beginning to spill over into the human world, so I assume this is going to be a follow-through from that. I've seen some discussion regarding what could be eye imagery from this overhead shot, and while I get it, while I see it, and while I think the mystery of Uryu's almighty connection will play a part in this fight, I don't think this is meant to be specifically an eye. I mean, it totally could be, but this kind of cat-like eye, they don't really have any relevance in Bleach whatsoever unless there's something new on the way, which I kind of doubt. So yeah, I genuinely cannot wait for this. It's also weird because Uryu and Haschwalth should be fighting inside the main fortress of Varvelt itself, so where could this be? Unless, of course, this rift in the world is kind of bleeding through into the fortress, but that's also what's making me think this is potentially under, or where, that red energy sphere was. As we could see in Core 3, this sphere was kind of suspended over a pit of sorts, so it's possible that under that sphere is just a straight drop to the outside world, like some kind of energy shaft or something. Anyway, like I said, I can't wait to see what that's all about, and I really hope said red energy sphere is actually explained at least this time. Utilized, maybe, but we'll see. Moving on, there's more from this fight to enjoy. We get a close-up shot of Haschwalth still wielding the Almighty as he screams something at Uryu. It could be new dialogue, it could even be the dialogue he used in the trailer, or it could be from the manga, we don't know, but the shot itself is of course totally new. Also, the art for this shot is exceptional. Immediately after this, we are treated to another very cool shot. Although it's difficult to make out, it doesn't look like Haschwalth has the Almighty anymore, and he uses his sword to block Uryu's own arrows as they come rushing towards him, pushing the Sternritter back up into the rafters. In a reused shot from episode 33, Uryu, no longer using his full Volsten dish, which is weird, conjures a gigantic arrow to fire at Haschwalth. This is definitely, in my opinion, the most conspicuous reused shot so far. Like I said, it's not the end of the world, but I am surprised to see one so blatant. And also, I can't help but wonder if this is the only time we see Uryu without his completed Volsten dish. Is that because in that original shot in episode 33 against Renji, he wasn't yet using his completed Volsten dish yet, and they haven't yet updated this one? Or maybe he does start out the battle against Haschwalth not in his full Volsten dish form yet. In another new shot, Uryu, once again back using his full Volsten dish, stands to his feet and smirks at Haschwalth, while he also gets a new line of dialogue, saying, "Go ahead and try, if your sword can even reach me." We are then treated to the final shot of Uryu versus Haschwalth from the trailer, and indeed they have saved one of the best for last. Earlier I said the shot of the rift was the most interesting in the trailer, but actually this is right up there as well. With his sword held out behind him, Haschwalth readies himself as he's surrounded by a flock of arrowheads from Uryu's Volsten dish, and as we've seen in his previous new fights, these arrowheads themselves are also capable of firing additional blasts from their tips. Now, in the trailer, energy beams are seen stretching, almost in slow motion, from the arrowheads, all aimed at the Sternritter Grand Master. Are these Uryu's arrows simply being fired at a much more glacial pace for some reason? I mean, it clearly isn't in slow motion because Haschwalth himself is moving normally, unless it's depicting how fast he's going in comparison. Or perhaps, and in my opinion more likely, is Uryu conjuring a sort of Sail Schneider equivalent from every single one of these arrowheads, ready to kind of lock blades with Haschwalth, using an army of flying swords of his own. Regardless though, as cool as this shot is, and it's yet another shot that looks fantastic, the most fascinating part comes from Haschwalth himself. With his sword held out behind him, the blade is suddenly engulfed in the messy black power of the Soul King himself, as Haschwalth seemingly channels the energy around his blade. Not only does this look cool, but it also seems to finally make good on a manga panel from all those years ago that went nowhere, from which nothing ever materialized in the source material. At the start of chapter 661, Haschwalth, emerging from the darkness to confront Uryu and Ichigo, seems to control the very shadows themselves, as if manipulating the darkness around him. It's quite explicit he's definitely doing that, and yet it's never brought up nor mentioned again. Well, we also saw this happen in Core 3, and now it seems to be being utilised even more explicitly. With the power of the almighty, Haschwalth is also able to command at least some of the Soul King's excess overflowing power, I imagine in a similar fashion to Yhwach, albeit just probably less of it. So here's how I think the fight is maybe currently panning out just based on what we know. At the end of Core 3, we left Uryu and Haschwalth preparing to face off, with Haschwalth utilising the Almighty. In the manga, the next time we see them, Uryu is already savagely beaten, but the sun is rising and so Haschwalth has relinquished the Almighty back to Yhwach. We never get to see him use it. That's clearly not the way things are going in the manga. Instead, Uryu activates his Volsten dish, likely pretty quickly into the fight, and spends some time evading Haschwalth, and even going on the offensive, with Haschwalth probably deflecting all of Uryu's sword arrow things with the additional power of the Soul King on his blade. Haschwalth then overpowers Uryu and pins him to that rafter. However, before he can administer the finishing blow, he loses the Almighty at some point, allowing Uryu to turn the tables again and force Haschwalth back with his arrows, which is where that shot of Uryu rising, wielding his arrowheads comes from in the first teaser trailer. Again, the sequence could be totally out of order. It kind of depends on when Haschwalth loses the Almighty. And to be fair, while I initially wondered if the rift shot would really be in the first 3 episodes, it does kind of seem like if Haschwalth is to lose the Almighty, it needs to happen fairly quickly. So it does kind of seem like Core 4 is going to hit the ground running in a way the other cores haven't really done. Perhaps then much of Uryu versus Haschwalth takes place in episode 2 of the core maybe, though like I said I fully expect it to continue throughout, and I'm still hoping for Ryuken to get involved. But with the new content out of the way, we return to the manga to close things out. The next shot of Yhwach rising from his throne while covered in the overflowing surplus power of Reo comes straight from the final page of chapter 672, while the close-up of his face, if taken immediately after, and I think it probably is technically new, though again it could be from later in the fight. Now, this image of Yhwach looks genuinely phenomenal in the manga, and so it was always going to be a tall order for the anime to live up to. The simple fact, at least as far as I'm concerned, is that the Soul King's power just looks better in the black and white manga medium, the same as how Ichibe's power did too. But still, the anime is doing a good job here, and he does look really cool and menacing. Interestingly, I can't help but think they've also changed slightly how they draw Yhwach's Soul King eyes, and they look much better here in Core 4, at least as far as I'm concerned. This next shot featuring Ichigo firing a Getsuga into Yhwach's overwhelming power is also new. As Ichigo is missing a sleeve but isn't yet using Horn of Salvation, then this shot takes place during the events of chapter 675, and is likely part of an extended sequence featuring Ichigo going up against Yhwach's black energy waves before Orihime intervenes. After this, we go back a little bit to when Ichigo has both of his sleeves again, and is seen slashing through Yhwach's power. See, I told you the sleeves would come into play. As I discussed towards the start of the video, this is all part of a new sequence from chapter 674, so it really does seem like Ichigo and Orihime versus Yhwach is being extended all over the place, which is great. The trailer ends with a pair of completely new shots, this time of Ichigo soaring downwards towards the Quincy King, before ending with him bringing his blades down, again likely part of the extended sequence from 674. However, the dialogue, of course, teases something a little further into the battle. We can hear Ichigo talking about how he's overcome despair time and time again, before at last activating Bankai. This dialogue comes from the end of chapter 677, so after he uses Horn of Salvation, and as far as I can tell, is probably the furthest point into the anime we've gone so far. The trailer is of course teasing the reveal of Ichigo's true Bankai, but for those of us who have read the manga, Does it hint at a proper reveal of Ichigo's bankai? To be totally transparent, I've never believed that the real Tensa Zangetsu has any weird fate-related powers. I don't buy it. I don't think it's meant to be taken literally. It's meant to be thematic. But if Tensa Zangetsu is gonna be given a full showcase of sorts, unlike in the manga, then it's much needed and well deserved, and I definitely hope to see it. And of course, before we end, I just want to talk quickly about the additional new shots found in the 15-second trailer as well. The first shot is of Yoruichi, and it comes from chapter 662, after she's been struck by Askin's gift ball, poisoning her and rendering her unable to fight until Kisuke comes to the rescue. It's technically a new shot. It might pan over her face or something while Askin is explaining his power, or it could just be a reworked expression from something like this panel, perhaps. Next, we see Kisuke Urahara, and I went into this a bit in my live reaction, but this shot of him is taken from chapter 664, after Askin has released his Volston dish and surrounded the area with his gift Berike. Again, I'm surprised the gift Berike appears to be green, but this specific shot is of Kisuke basically refuting Askin's motivation for following Yhwach. Askin wants to see what kind of world Yhwach will create from the ashes of the 3 current worlds, and muses that Kisuke must want the same thing. But Kisuke tells him a scientist would want to create that new thing with their own hands, rather than sit back and watch someone else do it for them. It's a fantastic exchange, and I'm very excited to see it. There's sadly no real sign beyond this of Kisuke versus Askin at all, and certainly not any sign of it being extended yet, but at the same time, like I said, it's being kept almost completely under wraps, so I do still have some hope. We then see a new shot of Uryu, though again it's not technically new, as it's reused from episode 40, but the lighting is now different, and as I said previously, I prefer this new look. Before we come to our final new shot, this time a menacing close-up of Haschwalth's face with the Almighty active. The deep blue glow beneath him tells me that this could be part of the same sequence where he has Uryu pinned, but I don't know for sure. Like I said, there was a lot to glean there from only a minute's worth of content, but that's what you get when it's basically all new footage from the anime, which is what I wanted, and I'm glad we got it. They are still very much holding Core 4 close to the chest, and I understand that might be frustrating for some people. I'd love to see more, but we're so close now. I'd really rather they don't spoil anything major. It's already fantastic that this trailer is pretty much made up exclusively of shots probably from the first 3 episodes, especially since I'm probably going to have to dodge spoilers for those episodes for the next 3 weeks or whatever it's going to be. That's going to be fun. But yeah, I'm very excited. I think they probably know they have something special, which is why they are really kind of holding it back to preserve the excitement and the secrets as best they can. Will we get another quote-unquote proper trailer? A sort of 2-minute long trailer featuring the opening and the ending? I think we probably will. And it'll be interesting to see how much that one spoils. I think at that point we want to be a little bit careful. But regardless, I'm very, very excited in case you can't tell from this video, and I hope you are too. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Did I miss anything from this trailer? How are you feeling about how Core 4 is currently shaping up? What are you really looking forward to seeing the most? How do you feel about what they've shown off so far? And are you hoping to see more before the new season drops in July? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Alright everyone, but that's it for today's video. As always, I hope you enjoyed it. I took something of value away from it as well. Let me know again your thoughts down in the comments below. And of course, hit subscribe if you haven't done already. It is quick, it is easy, and it is free to do. And it does help me out a lot, and I really do appreciate it. Also, check out the Patreon as well to help support the channel that extra step further, just like every single person in the credits is doing. All of your support means the absolute world to me, and I do greatly appreciate it. So thank you all so very much. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.